Well, it's the day after President Bola Tinubu secured what's been described as a landmark deal with the UAE. And on the program today, we'll take a closer look at the fine details of that agreement. The Labour Party kicks against string of tribunal judgments against lawmakers elected on its platform. And the latest one is that of Eti-Osa, which ordered a rerun in 90 days. The big question is, what's the way forward for the LP? Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Kayode Okikiolu here in Lagos. Well, President Tinubu is expected back in the country today, barring any changes, after a week which saw him attend the G20 summit in New Delhi, India, with several meetings and investment pledges on the sidelines. He then made a technical stopover in the United Arab Emirates, where he met with the president of the UAE. Now, the outcome of that meeting and the president's overall trip has generated varying reactions, and we're following up on some of them on the program tonight. Plus, it's the season of election petition judgments with some major upsets. It's certainly a full package tonight. But let's begin by telling you that there may just be another political drama in the offing, but this time in Ondo State, as Governor Rotimi Akeredolu just moments ago sacked all the media aides attached to the office of his deputy, Honorable Lucky Ayedatiwa. Governor Rotimi Akeredolu had only resumed work on Friday after a 3-month medical trip. And according to a statement by his media aide, Richard Olatunde, all members of the press crew attached to the deputy governor have also been disbanded with immediate effect. He directed the Ministry of Information and Orientation to provide coverage for the activities of the deputy governor's office henceforth. Well, the deputy governor, incidentally, had pledged loyalty to Governor Akeredolu. This sounds familiar, doesn't it? I mean, just days ago, a similar scenario played out in neighboring Edo State. So is there a trend here? Not forgetting that their off-cycle elections are also not that far apart. But we'll keep our eyes on those states as the situation unfolds. But that's not all that is trending on the political scene. So let's bring you a roundup of all of the other stories, and we'll be back with our first conversation on the show tonight. Here's our political roundup.
The candidate of the African Democratic Congress in the forthcoming governorship election in Kogi State, Honorable Lekki Abejide, is insisting that the time has come for the Okun people in Kogi West Senatorial District to produce the next governor of the state, having supported the other 2 senatorial districts in the last 27 years to occupy the position. Honorable Abejide explained this during a visit to the traditional rulers in Yagba, federal constituency of Kogi State.
There are so many insinuations, so many stories that I have stepped down. For who?
The leadership of the People's Democratic Party is appealing to governors and other elected members of the party to fund the party's Democratic Institute, which has become comatose since the PDP first lost the presidential election in 2015. Speaking at the inauguration of a committee to revive the institute in Abuja, the PDP Deputy National Chairman, South, Mr. Taufik Arapaja, says the Democratic Institute will need the financial support of the governors and other members of the party to get back on its feet.
They appeal to all our governors too, who are leadership in this party, to make sure they continue to help us, our senators, House of Reps, members of the House of Assembly.
The Northern Stakeholders Consultative Forum wants President Bola Tinubu to consider picking the Minister of Youth Development from the Northern region for peace and stability of the country. Addressing a news conference in Kaduna, the spokesman for the group, Mr. Ali Usani, urged the President to consider appointing the National President of Arewa Youth Consultative, Yerima Shetima, as Minister due to his contribution to the nation's unity. Meanwhile, another group from the southern part of Kaduna State are also asking President Tinubu to consider zoning the ministerial slot to the southern part of the state in the interest of equity and inclusiveness. The group believes that southern Kaduna has been marginalized in both state and federal appointments under the APC administration since 2015.
It is only fair that the slot be given to someone from the southern part of the state.
Following the recent completion and inauguration of the general hospitals built by the administration of Governor Hope Uzodimma across 3 oil-producing local governments of Oguta, Ohajegbema, and Oru East, some youths in the communities have passed a vote of confidence on the governor, endorsing him for a second term in office. The youths under the aegis of Imo Hope Restoration Group in Owerri adds that this is the first time the oil-producing area will witness a developmental project in their communities, as they promise to mobilize the support for the governor's re-election.
So let's begin, shall we? There have been series of reactions to President Bola Tinubu's meeting with the President of the United Arab Emirates, Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, yesterday, and the statement which came from the presidency given details on the agreements reached at that meeting. Well, Channels Television spoke with the president's spokesperson, Jure Gilali, on the program yesterday, where he gave more insight into the meeting, the contents of the statement, and an overall look at the president's one-week trip. So take a listen. All right, we'll bring you that excerpts from the interview with Mr. Jure Gilali, just to set a tone for the conversation we're about to have on the program tonight. So right after that statement was released, and in fact, after the interview, there had been series of reactions from members of the opposition, Nigerians alike, some commending the outcome of that meeting, but for some others, it was more critical. So let's speak with one of them on the program tonight. We are joined by a member of the People's Democratic Party, Mr. Ilemona Onoja, also a member of the Presidential Campaign Council's media arm. He joins us from the nation's capital, Abuja, our Abuja studios. Thank you for joining us on the program, Mr. Onoja.
Thank you very much for having me, Coyote.
Right, so let's maybe step back and take a look at the major points from that deal, from the meeting which President Bola Tinubu had with the president of UAE, the outcome which was put out from that statement released by the president's office. Quite a number of things actually came out, but let's just quickly walk through some of them. First one was immediate cessation of the visa ban placed on Nigerian travelers. There was also the immediate resumption of flights or flight activities for Etihad, Emirates Airlines. There was also the talk about the government not having to pay anything immediately, and it goes on. We'll bring you a breakdown of that. But let me get your opening comment, really, to this one, because I've seen comments from you and other members of your party, and you're clearly not impressed. So let's begin from there. Why is this the case? Is this politics, or there are genuine reasons here?
Again, thank you very much for having me. It is the first reaction to the announcement was one of commendation. We're all Nigerians who want the best for our country, regardless of the people who deliver that best for our country, or people who want the growth, development, and then improvement in the welfare, well-being, and safety of all Nigerians, regardless of wherever they are. And so the initial reaction was one of commendation. But the moment the dust settled a little bit, we began to see holes in the story. And then this is in politics. This is us asking valid questions as to why there are holes in the story. We must remember that Ajuri Ngelale is the presidential spokesperson and speaks on behalf of the president. Whatever he says in official matters must be construed to have received the approval of the president. Now, the way things have gone, the language used in the press statement give an indication that either he and his principal did not understand the context of the conversations that they just had, or they determined that they needed to misrepresent the facts to the Nigerian people, misrepresent the content of the conversation that they had with to the Nigerian people, or they distracted from the other piece of information or piece of news that came out yesterday, which was that the FBI and the CIA and other security agencies in the United States had determined that they were going to release 2,500 previously classified documents relating to President Bola Tinubu and his time in the United States. So it is one of the three. And none of these three things bode well for the Nigerian people. It is worrisome that 24 hours after the announcement had been made, we're unable to say definitely what the meaning of its contents were. Kayode, you interviewed Ajuri yesterday on your program, and you asked him the very direct question: has there been an immediate lifting of the ban? Will flights immediately commence between Nigeria and the United Arab Emirates? Can Nigerians immediately apply for and receive visas? He went on a rigmarole, failed to answer your question, and began to speak about free lunch and responsibilities and requirements and other things that needed to be done. Now, that gives the inclination that a conversation has commendably been opened to resolve the wider issues. But if that is the case, why are you coming to come and lie to Nigerians that the wider issues have been resolved and that there has been an immediate lifting of the ban? I mean, words have meaning. It is very straightforward. Why the misrepresentation? Why the inability to answer directly? I can move to the other point that says, well, what are we really... That gives an indication that there's a power tussle of some sort within the corridors of power at Aso Rock. Typically, announcements like this... Just a moment, Mr. Onaja.
Before we get to that next point, if I may, pardon my buttoning there. You have said you believe that the facts were not laid bare as it ought to be. And I imagine that maybe that means you have the facts. Do you have alternative facts for you to say categorically that the president's team didn't give Nigerians the true picture?
I will tell you this, Kayode. I will tell you this very categorically. Look at the announcement, the State House press release. The media team of Mr. President says, we have reached an agreement. We have reached an agreement. We have reached an agreement. Look at the press release from the United Arab Emirates authorities. It says, we explored. Excuse me. It says very categorically, we explored opportunities for further bilateral collaboration. We exchanged views on a number of regional. We discussed the upcoming COP28. We stressed the vital importance of international cooperation. They did not announce any sort of agreement whatsoever. All they did was diplomatic speak to say, we are in conversation with the Nigerian government. Two completely different statements. Two completely different statements. When we take into consideration that the APC-led federal government has lied to the Nigerian people before on this very same issue. Remember that the former Minister of Aviation, Mr. Hadi Sirika, announced on national and international television that the visa ban had been reversed and the flights had commenced. The visa ban wasn't reversed. Flights hadn't, in fact, commenced at the time. So, pardon me if I rely more on the circumspection of the UAE authorities. I mean, like I said, Ajuri was on your program yesterday. He could not answer you directly if the ban had been lifted. He instead started speaking about responsibilities, started speaking about requirements, started speaking about conditionalities, giving the impression that indeed there were things that the Nigerian government has been told to do that the Nigerian government has not yet done. That does not translate to an immediate. Anybody, if the ban had been lifted immediately, you would have been able to go to a website or to book a flight, or you would have been able to go to a website to schedule a process for the issuance of a visa. Neither of those two things can happen now. Words have meaning.
All right. So just before we move on to some other points you wanted to make, overall, because there were a series of, excuse me, there were a series of points made from the statement by the president's spokesperson. Are you saying all of them, all of those points made, or at least the outcome of that meeting with the president of the UAE, are you saying all of them do not sit well with you? Are there some that you may commend?
I will commend a commitment to, if there is a commitment to invest billions of dollars in the Nigerian economy, even though there's a lack of specification as to how much will be invested, there's a lack of specification as to the sectors of the Nigerian economy, where those investments will be, there's a lack of specification. But, I mean, there's that part of it that says there will be investments. I mean, if we take into consideration the balance of trade between the Nigeria as a nation and the UAE, we spent significantly, I think in 2000, the year before the ban was given, if I'm not mistaken, we spent about $276 million in the United Arab Emirates. I mean, these were monies that were spent in their hotels, monies that were spent in their restaurants, monies that were spent in trade and other sorts of things. So if there is an indication that we will receive similar investment into the Nigerian nation that will create, into the Nigerian economy, that will create jobs for our people, that will, and all of that, and that will, improve the balance of trade between the two nations, of course that will be commended. And I mean, anybody who doesn't commend that will not be, maybe doesn't mean well for the country. However, if there are already question marks with the rest of the statement, why will anybody just take that, off the bat with more than a pinch of salt? We haven't seen the United Arab Emirates authorities issue a similar commitment. All again, remember, read their press statement. We will explore, we discussed, nothing in terms of an agreement, no reportage of a conclusion of what the discussions were. None. I would think that if you look at it critically, the people have used diplomatic speak to say we haven't reached any agreement. We are discussing it, yes, but we haven't reached an agreement, and it's very clear to see. About 6 hours ago, the United Arab Emirates reached a conclusion, reached an agreement with Armenia for Armenian citizens to enter into the UAE visa-free. They announced it clearly, unequivocally announced it. Where is the same clarity? Where is the same unequivocation on behalf of the Nigerian people, directed at the Nigerian people? There's clarity with one. Why is there no clarity with the other? The only reason why there will not be clarity is that conclusions have not been reached. The only reason why there will not be clarity is that there's not been an agreement.
I know that also in that conversation, the president's spokesperson talked about some, finalizing the details, the fine details of the agreement. But don't you think that if the content and the agreements reached in that meeting were misrepresented, then at least we'll have maybe heard from the other side saying, well, that's not what we agreed to. Wait a minute, this is not what really played out.
The other side, I've already told you what played out for them. And this goes to, if one side is saying we're just discussing, we're just exploring, we are just, if one side is saying that and another side is saying, oh, we have reached an agreement, then you have to ask the question, does the other side really understand what they went to do? Do they? And that's a very scary prospect. It's a really scary prospect. Another thing could simply be they need a win. They want to hurry up and announce good news to the Nigerian people. And the Nigerian people really desperately desire good news. We hear too much bad news in the country. However, there is a repeated pattern from government, from the previous APC government, from the current APC government, to say statements that are not a proper reflection of what is going on. I mean, a layman on the street could say they lied to the Nigerian people. It was the same Ajuri that announced a few weeks ago that the government will release grain from Nigeria's strategic reserves to help as palliatives to ameliorate the harsh effects of the economy and removal of subsidy. But we have seen that government has gone into the market to buy food from the market to distribute as palliatives, thereby increasing demand and thereby raising the price of food for the common man. So we see that there's a pattern of representing things that are not as though they are. That pattern already exists. Therefore, why will anybody give benefit of the doubt when there's a pattern, there's a pattern, systemic continuation to deceive, to pull wool over the eyes of Nigerians,
right,
to create a smokescreen. Now,
well,
the ban
so questions
may yet be lifted in the
just
future.
before we move on,
the
on that
ban
one,
may
Mr.
yet be
Onoja.
lifted in the future.
Pardon me, just before we move on, so you mentioned some of the previous statements of the government, and you talked about the release of grains, fertilizers, and I think there have been different statements regarding this. There's been one regarding the release of fertilizer, grains. There's one regarding the purchase, the release of money to purchase some of these things. But particularly for the grains, which you say you perhaps have not seen, some will say, are you a farmer? Are you one of those who should receive that, such that you say this is a lie? Are you entitled to it and you didn't get it? What do you base your submissions on? That's the question.
I will base my submissions, and my submissions are based on my existence in Nigerian society. We've seen where they went to go and get grains from. They got grains from the market. They actually did an announcement that we are going to go and buy grains from the market. We've seen that. We've seen people in the market men and women, traders, say our grains are currently being bought by the federal government. If they were releasing grains from strategic grain reserves, you will see one of two things, possibly both. One, you will see that the amount of food that they will have to buy from the market will not be in that quantum. Two, you will see an effect in the reduction of the price of food for the average man in the market. Instead, what we have seen is increased demand occasioned by the federal government, which has resulted, simple economics, in a hike in the price of food. It's very simple. I mean, I know it's a detour from the topic of conversation, but it points to a pattern. Like I was saying before you asked the question, the ban may be raised in the future. And all well and good if they raise the ban, because Nigerians really do deserve it. However, as at today, the indications, particularly from the UAE authorities, is that while discussions are going on, conclusions have not been reached. Why the hurry? Now, I would quickly like to chip in here.
Right.
And say, assuming the ban has been lifted, or the ban will be lifted, right? Assuming, what's so special about it? Nigeria has always enjoyed, until the advent of APC in our government, Nigeria has always enjoyed proper diplomatic relations with the UAE. This is the problem that the APC created. Ajuri worked in the government that created this problem as a media aide. He's working in another government that is supposedly cleaning up a problem that their political party created.
Just a moment, Mr. Onoja. I don't want this to be a personal...
I'd like to finish.
I know, I just want to step in here. Let's not be personal. Just speak to the issue, so it's not as though we're personal.
Okay, so I'll speak to the issue. I'll speak to the issue. I apologize. Mr. Ngelale, if you're offended, I apologize as well. The issue here is this problem is a creation of the APC. If the APC is cleaning up its mess, what exactly are we celebrating them for? If they are cleaning up a crisis they created, why exactly are we clapping up for them? Why are we celebrating them? Why are they asking us to roll out drums and hail them and commend them? When literally this is a problem that did not exist for Nigeria and the Nigerian people until the APC came into our political space, until there was a failure of foreign policy by the Buhari administration. Why? So if the APC created a problem for us and is supposedly cleaning up that problem, solving that problem, why are we commending them? We must not make the mistake of benchmarking APC's performance against a previous APC government. That cannot be the case. The failures of the APCs are theirs yesterday, today, and forevermore. What we can do is benchmark the APC against the last PDP government. If the PDP did not have this problem, we will not commend you for solving a problem that you created. Remember what Mr. Wale, and I'm going to use this as a reference point. Mr. Wale, doing a couple of weeks ago, the coordinating minister of the economy, said the last time that Nigeria had a good economy, or that we had economic growth, was in the PDP, right? What that benchmark sets for us, and we must extrapolate into this sort of achievements, in quotes. What that sets for us is that if we want to do a comparison, we must go and compare against the PDP. So if PDP gave us 5% economic growth, if you're giving us 3%, where Buhari failed to give us more than 3%, you're giving us 4%, why are we commending you? I mean, what have you done that is so special? Right. If we did not have problems with the Dubai authorities before, the UAE authorities, if we did not have problems remitting funds to their airlines, and you have created that problem, and you are resolving that problem, why should anybody clap for you? Why?
Let's break down the issues further, and I'm glad we're taking a look at this holistically. So the issues are different. There's a visa restriction, which we've seen as a result of what has been described as some untoward activities here and there. There's that one on the one hand. There's the issue with the airline as well, FX repatriation, and some will say that's understandable based on where the country found itself with foreign exchange, scarcity, and all of that. Of course, there's the issue of investment, which you actually commend. But my question is this. I mean, in debates in democracy, the opposition, yes, will have its say, might not have its say, but at least there will be alternative ideas put forward. What would you have suggested to the Tinubu government to do in this case, such that, I mean, it will be better for you and you will receive it perhaps with joy?
One of the things that we must do is constantly be open, truthful, honest, and transparent with the Nigerian people. The penchant of the APC to tell lies, to deceive, pull the wool over the eyes of Nigerians, and generally governed by propaganda ought not to be acceptable. Only a few days ago, a senior member of this government said they will stop governing by propaganda. Well, here we are again. Apparently, old habits die hard. Tell the Nigerian people the truth. You cannot wish away problems that we have by propaganda. You cannot wish away problems that we have by deceit. You cannot wish away problems that we have by misrepresentation of the facts. Be open, be honest. If you've opened discussions that will lead to the lifting of the visa ban, say that. We've opened discussions. If you've opened discussions that will lead to further investment, say that. We've opened discussions that will lead to further investment. Don't come and tell us things that we're not or that are not as though they are. And this again, and this is why there is a grudge, this is why nobody is willing to give, or not many people are willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, because there is a repeated cycle of these attempts to deceive the Nigerian people. I'll give you another example, and I'm just using these examples from other parts of our economy and other sectors and other things that are going on to buttress my point that there is a pattern. I mean, it was only a few weeks ago that we heard the whole hullabaloo about our unemployment figures, because rather than resolve unemployment, the Tinubu-led government has chosen to rework the methodology by which it assesses unemployment. It's the same thing, it's the same principle here. Rather than work to resolve the issues that we have with the United Arab Emirates authorities, they're here and they've defined, it's like going to an exam. Seeing that you cannot answer the question, set your own questions, answer your own questions, submit, and come out and give yourself an A. That's literally what is going on here. Rather than doing the work that the Nigerian people deserve. As Nigerians, we deserve a break. We deserve a break.
Incidentally, Mr. Onoja, we're due for a break right now. It's interesting you use that word. We're due for a break on the program. But when we return, more issues to look at. Of course, we'll also talk about some major happenings within the Labour Party, its response to recent judgments by the tribunal. But that's in just a moment. Stay with us. Well, you're welcome back. Just before we continue our conversation with Mr. Ilemona Onoja in our Abuja studio, let's tell you about a judgment that may have upset the apple cart for the Labour Party. It was about 10 p.m. yesterday that the National Assembly Elections Petition Tribunal, sitting at the Tafawa Balewa Square in Lagos, nullified the return of Honorable Eti-Osa of the Labour Party as the duly elected member of the House of Representatives for Eti-Osa Federal Constituency. The tribunal also ordered INEC to withdraw the certificate of return issued to Honorable Atta, as it was not elected or returned by majority of lawful votes cast in that election. In the lead judgment, which was delivered by the chairman of a three-man panel, Justice Farouk Bunza, the tribunal declared the election inconclusive and ordered the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to conduct a supplementary election within 90 days in 32 polling units where elections did not hold. The other members of the tribunal are Justice Livingstone Iruba and Honorable Kadi Mohammed Inuwa. Justice Livingstone, however, dissented and held that the petitioners failed to prove their case, among other things. He cited the failure of the petitioners to call as witnesses the registered voters in the polling units where elections did not hold as proof that they failed to vote, and that if they voted, they would have voted the Labour Party. The petitioners in this case are the PDP's Bankole Wellington, also known as Banky W, who was declared second in the polls, and the APC's Ibrahim Babajide Obanikoro, who came third. Now, take a look at what INEC called for that particular election. For the Labour Party's candidate, INEC had declared that, and for the PDP's candidate, that was the number of votes, and of course, for the APC's candidate, that was what INEC declared. But at this point, the tribunal has ordered that a rerun be conducted in 32 polling units of Eti-Osa Federal Constituency. Well, we had been billed to have the man in the eye of a storm, Honorable Thaddeus Atta, who scored 24,075 votes as at that time, but last minute he's dropped out. But not to worry, we'll continue with the conversation on the program tonight. We'll still have with us Mr. Ilemona Onoja, a member of the People's Democratic Party, just analyzing the outcome of President Bola Tinubu's trip, and we'll also be talking governance issues, the role of the PDP as an opposition party, and the rest. But Mr. Onoja, let's continue with our conversation. And I want to land on this point which you were making, really, about what ought to have been done. You said communication should have been done right. Is that the only issue you have? Just the communication? Will you say all the other things are going well?
I'll be hard-pressed to agree. As a Nigerian, I'll be hard-pressed to agree. We exist in an almost, we exist in a almost Hobbesian state, where life can be short, nasty, and brutish. We're desperately insecure. We're significantly poorer than we were. We have significantly less access to health care. We have significantly less access to education. We have significantly less value for our money. We have significantly less productivity. And I can go on and on and on. There's a plethora, there's an almost inexhaustible list of ills that trail the Nigerian society. And so we're in that place where we want to see results. And if you're lying to us, we don't believe that you're doing the work that is required to get us out of our Hobbesian state. Of course, I'd like to see more. I'd like to see commitments from the government that stipulates one of the key fundamentals in this dispute between Nigeria and the UAE is the trapped funds for airlines in Nigeria. Give a commitment as to when and how the monies will be paid. That will give that would be a demonstration of seriousness, if you will. I would like to see a roadmap, if you will, that will indicate what will be done, when, where, and how. What are the requirements that the United Arab Emirates authorities, and I picked this up because Ajuri spoke about it on your program yesterday. What are those requirements? What are the things that we are required to do? How are we going to do those things? There'll be if you put those before the Nigerian people, these sorts of information, we would see we're not an unreasonable set of people. we would see a demonstration of commitment to resolve our issues. And then we perhaps may at that point be able to give you grace. At the moment, we're not seeing that. Instead, what we're seeing is an attempt to govern by propaganda. We're tired of that, so we will not accept it.
Right, so we'll just pause for a moment on governance issues and talk about something which concerns, I mean, your area of expertise. You are a legal practitioner, a lawyer, and I mean, just speaking about some of the recent judgments, the National Assembly Petition Court, which just ordered a rerun in Eti-Osa. A typical case is the Presidential Election Petition Court, which, of course, upheld the election of President Bola Tinubu. The candidate of your party, your principal, has, of course, kicked against it. The Labour Party kicked against the Presidential Tribunal Court's or Election Petition Court's decision and is kicking against the Eti-Osa Court's judgment. So over time, especially in recent times, we've seen parties kicking against that. But this might be tricky because while the Presidential Election Petition Court did not favor your principal, the National Assembly Tribunal of Eti-Osa favored a member of your party. That's the candidate of your party, really. So what do you think, as a legal practitioner, is playing out here? Because you are a member of the bar, also a member of a political party that holds a notion about what the court has done. On
this issue, I would like to say that with respect to the elections in Eti-Osa, the finding of the court that elections were not conducted in certain polling units and should be reconducted seemed consistent with quite a number of facts. Those polling units were identified, some of them were disrupted, some weren't, late arrival of materials. There was identification, there was evidence adduced to corroborate the position of our candidate that elections didn't hold in those polling units. The margin, the number of people who could have voted in those polling units by far exceeds the margin of victory. It's settled law that once that scenario occurs, you must declare the elections inconclusive and conduct a rerun election. This was not done. The court has corrected that anomaly. So it's that on the face of it, you know, that seems okay. I haven't read the dissenting judgment, so I don't know, you know, some of the principles upon which the judge who gave the dissenting judgment reached his conclusion. But it is established that in 32 polling units, there were no elections. The number of people who could have voted, who had collected their voters' cards, and who could have voted in that election far exceeded the margin of 6,000 between the Labour Party candidate and the PDP candidate, and so have a rerun election. And that's fine. But once we leave there, in our political party, we have complaints about the lack of consistency, if you will, in judgments that are being given. At the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, we heard that matters, and the matters of the validity of the nomination of a candidate is a pre-election matter. Now, there's a question there, and if I have time, I'll discuss it. But just for the purposes of answering your question, we heard that validity of nomination is a pre-election matter. However, at the National Assembly, we've seen 2 or is it 3 judgments against the PDP where the holding is that validity of nomination is a post-election matter. And we have seen elections in favor of PDP candidates being overturned. I'll give an example. Ikenga Ugochinyere in Imo, I think that's the Eti-Osa Federal Constituency, if I'm not mistaken, had his election overturned because the panel of judges held that the primary that produced him as the PDP candidate was not validly conducted. But that is the sort of thing that the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal just held to be a pre-election matter. Now, we operate the principles of stare decisis, that is judicial precedent, where a lower court is bound by the decision of a superior court. How did the judges of that panel depart from that holding to reach a separate holding where they investigated and then treated the matter of a primary as a post-election issue.
But Mr.
Remember
Nodja,
also that the Presidential Election
issues?
Petition Tribunal...
Pardon me, aren't these two different issues? So you talk about the validity of a primary. Isn't that different from the eligibility of a candidate? I mean, clearly they're not the same.
No, at the PEPT, we challenged the validity of the nomination. We spoke about the nomination. Once you are able to remove the break of the nomination, the foundation, that is the foundation of the house. The house must crumble. So we spoke about the validity of the nomination. We were told that that was a pre-election issue. We were told that that was a pre-election issue. So we've come to Eti-Osa, and I just use this as an example. I think there are 2 or 3 judgments like that. And we're wondering, how come you're treating it as a post-election issue? Since when did nomination, because the words of the judge in these 2 judgments were that they were not validly nominated because the primaries conducted that produced them as PDP candidates were not validly conducted. So it again goes for the nomination. Remember also that last year, the PDP had gone all the way up to the Supreme Court to challenge the validity of the nomination of the then vice presidential candidate of the APC. And we were told that that is within the exclusive remit of members of the party who contested that primary election. How come we are coming here now, and in defiance of the principle of law established by the Supreme Court, a tribunal is saying a member of an opposition party can challenge the validity of a primary election? So there is a lot of worry within the PDP as to the inconsistency in the applications of the principles of law, where the only common strand is that judgments are being given against PDP candidates. And that worries all of us in the party.
And I find this
that
rather
severely
interesting.
Worries all of us in the party.
I find this rather interesting because we've had, senior lawyers describe this judgment as well-written, well put together. In fact, it was Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Robert Clark, recently. In fact, he went as far as saying he doesn't think anything will come out of escalating this to the Supreme Court. So it's quite interesting that we've had people say, well, this judgment indeed was well done. And I find it also interesting. Let me just quickly bring this in because there's been the back and forth. And as a legal practitioner, I'd like to get your thoughts on that. The certain watermark that has been talked about time and again. Your party had spoken about it. And I wonder for you, did you see the same issues? Being someone who practices law, who understands law, did you think that there was any hanky-panky playing out there?
My party has taken a position on that and asked that whatever controversy that there is be clarified. I will align myself with the position of the party. It's not nobody's casting any aspersions on the integrity of the justices of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. What we have asked is that, and this seems curious, and this does not seem normal. We've never had such a situation before. And so please, can you clarify? I'm sure that if a clarification is provided, not just for us, but also for the Nigerian people, we can quickly move on from there. Now, to speak to your earlier question about the position of senior advocates of Nigeria and other senior practitioners of the profession, we have also seen many senior advocates of Nigeria be wrong before, and that the positions that they have held have been overturned on appeal and judgment has been given against their positions. This happens rather frequently in our profession. So I don't think that because it was said by a senior advocate of Nigeria, that means it is sacrosanct and that it has the effect that, we cannot point out loopholes. And I can point out a couple of loopholes very quickly and things that worry us. One of the particularly worrisome, and this worries me very greatly, positions was where one of the justices said that anybody who relies on the electoral umpire to provide materials upon which they can build their case, that person is an unserious person, is a position of law that as a whole, the Federal Republic of Nigeria and all its citizens must reject. It's an interpretation or whatever it was, we must reject it. our constitution places a responsibility on the electoral umpire to provide materials for the pre-elections, during elections, post-election. To take that responsibility and put on petitioners means that what we are telling our petitioners, what we are telling our politicians, an already desperate group of people, is that they can resort to self-help for the purposes of gathering whatever evidence will preserve or will help them overturn the election of somebody else. That is a call to chaos and anarchy. And every Nigerian will already suffer considerably in the hands of many desperate politicians. To give them more reason to be desperate, I beg to disagree. I beg strenuously to disagree. And I believe that it isn't a belief, it is the provisions of our constitution, it is the provision of our electoral act that the electoral umpire is the custodian of all materials, documentation, and everything that relates to evidence.
Right.
That relates to an election.
Well, Mr.
So
Onoja,
saying that you will take that responsibility and put it elsewhere, my goodness. Well, actually, the interpretation looks at the provisions of the Constitution and turns it on its face. Most respectfully to the learned judge of the PEPT, justice of the PEPT, who made that declaration and interpretation.
well, Mr. Onoja,
And that's just one of a variety of issues that I have.
all right, so let's begin to wind down. Let's get back on track, our conversation around governance as we wind down. Now, just two quick issues I'd like to raise with you in just less than 3 minutes. I hope we can do that. First is the talk about easing the economic squeeze on Nigerians. And I've asked you earlier about alternative ideas. How will the PDP have done things differently with the current economic situation? And I'll speak particularly to the federal government disbursing 2 billion naira palliative funds to each state. I believe you were referring to that earlier on, where you talked about purchase and all of that. Now, the federal government essentially saying this should be in the hands of the state governments. And we have PDP state governors as well. Can you vouch for PDP state governors that they are doing right by the people with these palliative funds?
Oh, I can do, to a reasonable extent, I can do that. The first governor,
so which of them wouldn't you vouch for?
Very clearly, very categorically, is the governor of Edo State, Governor Godwin Obaseki. He was, very quickly immediately after the removal of subsidy had been announced, it was the first state to announce an increase in minimum wage. It was the first state to announce the rollout of free palliative buses. It was the first state to announce a variety of measures that aimed at ameliorating the cost. They very quickly began distributing food items and relief materials across the state. Same is being replicated elsewhere. Of course, we have a couple of states that still have a few logistic issues. But I can, to a reasonable extent, vouch for the commitment of the PDP governors, all of whom were elected very popular mandates, and who enjoy a lot of, in Plateau, we're seeing a lot of good work there. In Zamfara, we're seeing a lot of good work there. In Adamawa, we're seeing a lot of good work there. And there is a commitment, and it's demonstrable. There's evidence abounds of the distribution of food items, one of the particularly interesting things that I saw.
Well, Mr. Onoja, because of time, we have to wind down on this one, Mr. Onoja. We're totally out of time, really. But it's important to also percolate that conversation to the sub-nationals, which is why I asked you, because they have a major role to play. But on a final note, you're a young person in the opposition People's Democratic Party. There's been a lot of back and forth, internal conflict. It is still on for a lot of people. And I wonder, for you as a young person, I imagine, you see perhaps a role in governance in the future. For your party, what kind of future do you see for the PDP?
The future that my party will have, the future that my party will have, the future that my party will have will depend on the leadership of my party's ability to immediately get us the sort of reform that we desperately need, to immediately, as quickly as possible, resolve the conflicts within the party one way or the other, and then reunite, repurpose, and give us the opportunity to rebuild an agenda that we share with the Nigerian people. We did not deserve to be in this place that we currently are. We need the leadership of our party to quickly, efficiently, and in the best interest of not just members of the party, but of the generality of Nigerians. We need the leadership of our party to resolve the issues that plague us. We no longer have this time. There's far too much discontentment, there's far too much anger, there's far too much suffering in the land for us to continue in this vein. Resolve this crisis one way or the other. Give us a path to the future so that we can begin to forge that path. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ilemona Onoja, a member of the People's Democratic Party, thank you so much for your time on the program this evening.
Thank you so much for having me, Kayode.
Right, just before we go, let's tell you that the FCT Minister, Mr. Nyesom Wike, has inaugurated what can be described as his cabinets. That's the FCT Executive Council. They are called Mandate Secretaries. A total of 8 were appointed by President Bola Tinubu, and they've been sworn in with a warning that any infractions will attract immediate removal and penalties.
We stand here today with a profound sense of responsibility and optimism. It is our privilege to serve as the FCT Minister and the FCT State Minister to work with you as we embark on the mission of rebuilding and developing the FCT into a world-class capital territory. This task has been entrusted. To us by His Excellency President Bola Tinubu, Grand Commander of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I must remind you that this is the time to realize and achieve the agenda of Mr. President, which is renewed hope. What does that mean? What it means is that, yes, we have lost hope. Yes, we are going to make sure FCT is working. That's the essence of renewed hope.
And that's been the program for today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm Kayode Okikiolu. Goodbye.